Welcome. My name is Ben Sanford,
My name is Dylan McKinnon.
and we are two great apes, two lifelong friends that are naturalists and interested in the various uh, mysteries of the universe. And we are taking this time, this podcast, if you will, to explore with humor, hubris, and hypotheses the
And
different
hypothesis.
the different corners of the universe. So our goal every time is to come up with some sort of interesting question that someone might out there might take seriously and even research. But otherwise, today today is, I think, quite special, and because we're going to explore possibly Dylan's most favorite thing. Um, it's up there on his. So if he doesn't explode by the end of this, it'll be a miracle.
In the category of things that I, in the category of things that this phenomenon exists, it is my favorite. We are talking about Tyrannosaurus Rex, the tyrant lizard king, the greatest land predator of the greatest non-tool using land predator of all time. I would say they're the either humans are the Tyrannosaurus Rex of the mammal world, or the Tyrannosaurus Rex is the human of the Archosaur world, and that's I. I'm not even gonna weigh in. We're we're both kings in the evolutionary kings and queens and emperors in the evolutionary sweepstakes. Because it's so important to me, I'll start with my emotional connection, and then we can elaborate. Like most of us, tyrannosaurs are my favorite dinosaurs. They're the best dragons. I've had a lifelong connection to them. When I was 14, I was very fortunate enough to be able to visit the Field Museum in Chicago, where the largest tyrannosaur found at the time, and still the most complete tyrannosaur. I think it might be the most complete dinosaur, one of the most complete dinosaur specimens ever found. Like 95% of the skeleton was found. Absolutely massive, massive animal. 6, 7 tons in life is the estimate for how big this critter was. Um, and I actually I'll have to dig up. I was looking for this, or that I couldn't find, but I have photos of me. When I visited, we were visiting with a friend of ours who works in the back rooms of the museum, and I was able to see not the cast that are being put up for the actual the mount, the big skeleton on display in the Great Hall. I was able to actually see the actual original bones, and I have photographs of me with my arms wrapped around the jawbone of this absolutely massive, just god dragon of destruction. So that's one of my definitely one of my all time peak moments in life. And I'm not saying that I was quietly handed a small vial of tyrannosaur bones. I'm not saying that, but I can say that I've had this small I've had this small container of uh not tyrannosaur bone shards since that time, that I've slowly handed off a shard or two to people who've been important to me. And this, on the most very emotional point, this vial of not tyrannosaur bones is something I held in my dying father's hand on his deathbed. So it can't get more deeply personal to me talking about tyrannosaurs. and so begins the rant. And so begins the journey. Um, Tyrannosaurs were the Tyrannosaurus Rex. They were the largest member of their family, the Tyrannosaurids. There are actually many, many different species. We already know well over a dozen different species that were in the larger group. Tyrannosaurus was the last genus present, and they've actually split that into 3 different species now. So this is really cool. It's not There's Tyrannosaurus Rex, Tyrant Lizard King, they also have Tyrannosaurus, I believe it's Imperator, no, Emperor, and they have Tyrannosaurus Regina, so Queen. So Tyrant Lizard Queen, which I do believe they gave to the specimen Sue, which they gendered just because it was named after the gal who discovered it. But this was actually a question we had. I posted on social media that we were doing this talk, and I asked one question. Someone had asked about differences in gender between Rexes. That's still kind of, it's neither here nor there because we don't know enough. It's hard to gauge gender in animals that lay eggs. You pretty much have to have a specimen that was still retaining eggs to be certain this is a biological female member of the species. So answer one question right off. There's no clear indication of any big difference between males and females. So we don't have adults that have any kind of evidence of sexual dimorphism. They don't have antlers or horns or any other big ship. So as far as we know, adult males and adult females pretty much look the same, which does, starting off, that tells us a good deal about the species and their I guess you call it their hierarchies in whatever social interactions they had. They, let's see, I'm trying to getting because if Dylan doesn't scream for this, trying not to get overexcited, not to get too ahead of myself. Yeah, let's maybe I'll save the social points about the species here. I'm going to lose my mind. Ben, ask a question so I can focus up on this.
How about so give us a sense of the environment landscape. Like how many creatures were running around? How many Rexes were running around at one time? I mean, in the movies and the books and stuff, they always show like one big one, but how common were they, would you say?
So thank you. They lived in the late Cretaceous. Tyrannosaurus Rex lived in the western half of the United States, in the late Cretaceous, at the time basically where the Rocky Mountains and the western Great Plains is right now. That was a separate continent. The middle of the continent, so from Texas through Oklahoma, Kansas, all that, the chalk country, that was all a shallow sea. So they were just on this island long strip continent. It was mixed seasonal woodlands. Think almost like what's a good example? Think like something between Florida and Northern California. There were deciduous trees. There was plentiful conifers. You absolutely would have seen redwood. There would have been ginkgo forests. There would have been dawn redwoods in Cyprus in the lowlands. There were magnolia trees. There were hollies. It was somewhere in between the kind of plant regime we see nowadays and the more primitive. It was right in the middle there. So there are elements that would have been completely familiar. You would say, oh, there are water lilies. That's a water lily. And you wouldn't be, it would take an expert to say that's a different species. I don't know what this is. And like I said, there were magnolias. There were camellias. Tea was a present organism in the undergrowth. This was being preyed on by one of the most amazing diversities of herbivorous dinosaurs, herbivorous animals that's ever seen. The landscape was just filled with tanks, living tanks. I think one of the coolest things about tyrannosaurs isn't just how amazing they were physically, behaviorally, whatever. They completely, to say they dominated the environment is that's inaccurate. I would say they defined their environment. Everything big enough to be preyed upon by a T-Rex, which is basically everything from the size of a groundhog up was that they were strongly affected by tyrannosaurs. So I like using the term. It's funny. Video game for multiplayer terminology is very helpful. They have this description of different types of characters you can play. Tanks is anything really big, bulky, can't move very fast, that can cause a lot of damage and soak up a lot of damage. You have the ceratopsians. You have Triceratops. Had that critter had the largest head of any land animal ever. Although technically, some would say, well, actually, Torosaurus had a slightly larger head, but there's a debate whether that was actually just a fully grown male Triceratops. So, either way, you had massive, massive animals with incredibly well built, well evolved defensive structures. You had so with the Triceratops, they had 3-4 foot long horns, at least that long, and a giant head. A head that weighs over 1,000 pounds. This head is like it's a small car that swiveled on a ball and socket joint, the size of like 2 fists. So this head had a range of motion for swinging these horns and the massive frill, like a shoulder. It's you can see in museums a purple and socket. So this whole head just whipped incredibly fast. So if you think of like a bison and its ability to toss something, this is an animal that had the weight of a small bison that could wield. So just an absolute nightmare for a predator. You had the most armored animals in this planet's history, the ankylosaurs, the ankylosaurs, just very, very low built, low to the ground, can't be tipped over, completely covered in bony armor and a layer of horn and little spikes off of it. You had animals that had armored eyelids. So if their eye closed, there was actually bone over the eyelid, and just the medieval mace-shaped tail clubs, where it's a ball of bone and horn this big around that swung on the end of a 15-foot whip. So it's just like the amount of damage these things, the amount of force and therefore damage the prey species, the animals in the Tyrannosaurus environment that they could inflict. I'd say it would be comparable to like if you've ever watched videos of crane accidents or arborist fails, oh no, and the tree fell on the house instead of in between. That's the kind of force that these herbivores were able to wield. And this amount of armor and tankiness didn't exist to that extent anywhere else except in the late Cretaceous in the western United States because of Tyrannosaurus. And I guess I can step into another question that was asked. How did they interact with other predators? They didn't, because there were no other large predatory dinosaurs in the late Cretaceous in the western United States. So there were Tyrannosaurs, which from like the youngest, like a hatchling is the size like a turkey or a swan. They hatched out of like 17-inch long eggs, and there was no hopping or immediately born hopping around, already a decent sized turkey sized animal, all the way up to the 7-8 ton adults. The next largest predatory dinosaur in that environment, it wasn't much bigger than, I remember it was some kind of, I believe it was some kind of raptor. I'm not exactly sure on that, but smaller than the raptors in Jurassic Park. So nothing much bigger than like the size of a human. Think of like nothing more than a few hundred pounds was the next biggest predatory dinosaur in that environment. Tyrannosaurs, just every single size tier for every kind of way that an animal could prey on other land animals was taken up by Tyrannosaurs. So that's the level of how much the Tyrannosaur defined its environment and everything around it. Again, another example why I think it's fair to call them they're the humans of the biting world.
Biting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, every like we you know we kill with our hands, with rocks we throw. Everything else at some point, yeah, biting is going to be involved. So I have somewhere in my notes, in my poetry booklet, um, if there were a religion, if there were a faith system based entirely around biting, Tyrannosaurs would be how you depict God. Nothing comes close. At least on land, there's some sea creatures that had larger heads and might have had a larger bite, but yeah, just both pound for pound and absolute, they were just truly godlike monsters. That's the environment they lived in. um, as far as the animal itself, everyone is familiar with roughly how the critter looks. Massive carnivorous dinosaur. Really tiny front limbs. Um, Something that's easy to forget, since we always think of tyrannosaurs as the quintessential meat-eating dinosaur. It's easy to forget just how oversized the head is on this animal. Um, it's sort of it's weird. You don't usually see depictions of young tyrannosaurs, but in sort of the reverse of just about any other land animal, the head in the adult is proportionately larger to the size of the body than is with a hatchling or a young T-Rex. A young tyrannosaur, um, they were actually it was a much more slender animal, much longer legged. It was very lanky, very long tail, much longer legs. Almost, it's got sort of like not cheetah like, but think more think if an adult was like a bear, this is like a wolf. It's a much more long-legged, faster running animal. And with the mature adults, I'll have to describe them and their bite force, what the head could do, because that's the thing we have to talk about tyrannosaurs. Then I'll just talk about more about the younger ones. An adult tyrannosaur is sort of the biological equivalent of the A-10 Thunderbolt, the Warthog, the close support, Allied armed forces plane, where they took this massive gun, the something something Vulcan, just fires this ridiculously large round, and they built a plane around it. Tyrannosaurs and no tyrannosaurs, you could sort of say evolution took this absurdly large, incredibly powerful, obscenely powerful biting mechanism, and then built a species around it. Unlike just about any other predatory dinosaur, which had they had a big dinosaur. There were other comparably sized meat-eating dinosaurs throughout history. They all had, like Carcharodontosaurus, Giganotosaurus, they all had big heads. In some cases, heads were even a little bit longer than a Tyrannosaur, 5-6 foot long heads, with, very sharp, thin blade-like teeth. Their bite force wasn't really in proportion to their size. Like, I wouldn't want to get bitten by one, but it really wasn't the force of the bite that was causing the damage. It was, the blade-like teeth. So think more like a white shark attack, where it bites, shreds, goes away, the animal bleeds to death. Tyrannosaurs, it was a trash compactor. The amount of the head was so heavily built, so wildly overbuilt to produce pounds per square inch. The
Had to be able to crush tanks, basically.
Having to be able to crush tanks. There are, again, to put into perspective what the fossil evidence for how much damage they could exert. There are fossilized Triceratops pelvises and other large bones that have Tyrannosaurus Rex shaped tooth marks cookie cuttered out of a pelvis. This thing they were literally bone eaters. Again, something Tyrannosaurs and humans have in common. The mature adults could just eat skeletons of animals that had femurs this big around. They could just bite through them. I'll share a link to you, Ben. You can put on the video of crocodiles, a mature saltwater crocodile biting through cow femurs. So one of the sounds you would have heard in the Lake Cretaceous, Hell's Peak Formation, where you're around time, would have been the sound of elephantine femurs just being broken and chewed up by these absolute monsters. They're actually the tooth impressions of the Tyrannosaur, of their dentition, are embedded like a perfect cast into bone of some of these fossil finds. So they were just literally just going through bone like it was nothing. To compare it to hyenas is really there really isn't anything quite like it today for just how much force this thing could exert. The teeth themselves, they're poorly described in that they're often like, oh, it's like teeth like steak knives. Every other predatory dinosaur, pretty much the majority, had sharp teeth, sort of again the shark-like bladed teeth designed for cutting through flesh. These were not. These were pretty darn round in cross sections. So teeth like steak knives, no. Teeth like railroad spikes would be a better description. It came to something of a point, but for if you figure for our primitive skills folks out there, the bevel on the blade was more like much more like a chisel or like a stone axe head than an actual blade or knife, simply because it was meant for just going right through the bone.
I've been curious about their teeth. I mean, overall, kind of looking at from what I've seen of the skulls and stuff, they're not very big. Like they're not. There's like a lot of them. Is that right? I mean, they're big, but
So
they're not like giant incisors or anything.
yeah. And Ben, please interrupt at any point, because I'm going to keep on. I'm going to start disassociating thinking about Tyrannosaurs here. So
Oh,
thank
I
you,
hope so.
thank you for bearing with me. The teeth were if you look to the skull compared to other carnivorous dinosaurs, relatively short. The exposed surface of the tooth was relatively short. However, the roots of the teeth themselves were much deeper, embedded much further into the skull. So, an interesting side note to cover again, they, unlike pretty much any other predatory dinosaur, they had differently shaped teeth in different parts of the skull. So they actually were almost like mammals. They had specialized shaped teeth. Tyrannosaurs, in fact, they actually had what's incisiform front teeth, almost like an incisor, like we see in modern mammalian predators for scraping flesh off bone. So I'll cover the incisiform teeth in a second, but the largest teeth, so basically will be the equivalent, like if we're using a skull, like a bicuspid or canine. The exposed surface, so this long, big survey. The root was like this, like a foot and change, to handle all that force being exerted on it. They actually had a hard palate. Unlike you think, like you look at the skull of a snake or a lizard, there's no palate. It's a very lightweight structure. And these tyrannosaurs, predatory dinosaurs in general, their closest living relatives are birds. So think generally most of the adaptations are lightweight. This is the opposite. There's as much bone as you possibly could pack into a skull. So the skull wasn't just big, it was disproportionately heavy, disproportionately more designed to be able to just handle ridiculous force.
Do we have a sense of do you have a sense of the force measurements? Like, have they estimated?
Life force, tens of tons.
Jeez.
The numbers keep on going back and forth, and there are mechanical engineers who can give a better, more precise answer than I. No less than, let's give the lowest possible number. No less than 10 tons of force. So 20,000 pounds. I've heard, I've heard 35,000 pounds. So it's ridiculous. The assumptions are made both off of the just the basic structure of the skull itself. Averages of how strong is say an eagle's bite force, how strong is a crocodile's bite force, and how much pressure it would take to be able to press into a triceratops bone with that much deforming pressure. So these were, like I said, absolute trash compactors. The amount of I'm trying to see if I can. Yeah, I think the closest modern comparison would be with crocodiles, with a large crocodile or a large alligator, except warm blooded and even more specialized specifically for osteophagy, for bone eating. So the attack. Let's see. Maybe I should. You're quick. Ask another question.
How about since we're on the head, how about eyesight? They portray him as having poor eyesight.
Oh, the um uh the movie Jurassic Park. The don't move. It can't see us if we don't move. Two things about the depiction of Tyrannosaur there. Uh, First off, I hate to say it, for all the scientific inaccuracies, for me, that's the best depiction of Tyrannosaur in fiction. The animal that's depicted is genetically engineered. It has a bunch of things wrong with it because they threw a bunch of genes and said, here, it's part frog. So whatever. It's a genetically crippled Tyrannosaur, but still, that's, as far as I'm going, that's the one that reads the most like an actual animal. Um, Far from the question of its eyesight being uh vision based and it can't see, we don't move. They probably had almost certainly had some of the best vision of any land animal, probably any vertebrate ever. Uh, the movie gets wrong exactly how forward facing the eyes are. They have the eyes cocked more to the side. They had binocular vision, so that doesn't look quite as cool. It's like, oh, it looks kind of dorky. They had forward facing eyes about bigger than my fists, about this far apart from each other. They would have had extremely good vision. I could say eagle eyed, but that's a misnomer because with dinosaurs, birds, crocodiles, their whole family, it's a family of animals or reptiles referred to as archosaurs, and their eye structure, they diverge from our lineage mammals very long ago, hundreds and hundreds of millions of years ago. So we have very different fundamental eye structures, the way our eyes focus, the way our eyes have to move a little bit to refocus. Whenever you see birds do that, the head motion of a bird that's how it's called a syncade, that's how they're refocusing. So it's a very, very significantly different structure and function of the eye. Their low light vision is dependent, unlike mammals, is dependent on the absolute size of the eyeball. The smaller an eye you have, you just are not going to have as good vision. We have plenty of mammals that have tiny little eyes that have excellent night vision. Contrary to popular belief, bats have very good night vision. Rodents, other smaller animals have good night vision. Elephants have huge eyes, but they don't have disproportionately good night vision. With archosaurs, you have to have big eyes to have good night vision. So if you're describing an archosaur that has good night vision, crocodilians have good night vision. They have relatively large eyes. Amongst birds, you have whippoorwills. Whippoorwills is a tiny bird, huge eyes, good night vision because they have to catch moths on the wing. Owls have very large eyes and they have good night vision. Tyrannosaurs would have had exquisite night vision. So I think one of the scariest discoveries about them is that not only was their vision amazing, but I'm just gonna say this because I'm not a professional. I don't get fired if I say something too bombastic. They were nocturnal predators. They were absolutely hunting at night because why the hell not? The entire design of the animal is based obviously on causing a ridiculous amount of damage very quickly, which means we're talking an ambush predator. Something that big, you're going to attack once and really efficiently because you can't wrestle with any big prey at them because you're going to fall over, twist an ankle, and then you're kind of screwed as far as large predators go. You need to be able to you can't be injured by your prey species. Although we'll get to injuries in a second. They would have hunted night. They would have had owl-like night vision. So not much help there. Again, with the size of the eye, their acuity would have been ridiculous. Again, think eagle-like vision, the ability to perceive detail and movement miles away. Interestingly, a fun little thing you don't even consider, we don't have anything with binocular vision alive today that has eyes that are this far apart. Binocular vision, by having two eyes, each one has a slightly different field, and that's how we perceive depth. Their depth perception at a distance would have been unparalleled. So if you ever put on held up binoculars that are really wide out, and like, wow, there's so much depth at a distance, they would have had that with eagle-like or owl-like eyes. So their ability to perceive depth at a distance would have been better than anything else we've ever seen. So a tyrannosaur looking down a river valley, or from a hilltop down a river valley, looking at a herd of Edmontosaurs, a duck-billed dinosaur, 2 miles away, would be able to look and gauge, oh, these individual animals that are, they're a mile away, this one is 100 yards closer to me than this one. That's the level of depth they would have had. Not even to say what level of perception would have had really close. Their ability to look, and gosh, you can just easily imagine however their brains were designed, whether it was for perceiving motion or for perceiving color. All modern, they're close related birds, all have excellent color vision. So very decent chance it was able to perceive color very well. Perfectly possible it could have seen. I'm just gonna be bombastic and say it's probable they could have seen outside of the spectrum of light that is visible to humans.
That's what I was going to ask, like infrared or something, boy, see it.
In,
And
infrared or ultraviolet,
yeah,
hawks and eagles are able to look down. When they're looking down at a field, they can actually see the scent marks, the urine trails, scent marks left by rodents in the field. So the rodent paths from hundreds of feet up are, would have been glowing to them. So absolutely ridiculous what this thing could have done. And also because evolutionarily, it's a multi-ton animal. The eyes only weigh so much. So eyes are incredibly expensive tissues. If you're a predator that has access to, ridiculous volumes of calories, you can afford to say, hey, every generation, let's make our vision even better. So supernaturally good vision, worth considering one of the best senses of vision in this planet's history. So holding still wouldn't have helped you. They would have been, that's every prey
they
species
got that way wrong. Yeah.
We got that way wrong.
What about central nervous system, as far as, do they have a good sized brain? Do they have one brain? Do they have like other areas of neural plexus going on?
So as far as dinosaurs are sort of known for having they're often described as being dumb. They had small brains. For the baby boomer audiences out there, one of the comforts of childhood was that, well, they're big and horrifying, but they're dumb, and they're slow.
Brains the size of a walnut. Yeah.
Brains the size of a walnut. Funny enough, the animal for that's true for, Stegosaurus, lived 100 million years before Tyrannosaurs. So Tyrannosaurs are closer in time to humans than they are to Stegosaurs. Interesting little tidbit. Their brains were not the same size proportionally to modern vertebrates. And the question of trying to estimate intelligence by brain size, that's often used. They call it the encephalization quotient. So how big is the brain to the body size? And it's usually a decent way to measure intelligence. Usually the smarter animals will have bigger brains. To the point of Tyrannosaurs, they had large brains compared to other predatory dinosaurs. about twice the size of a comparable size, like I said, a Giganotosaurus or a Carcharodontosaurus. Uh, there's been a recently this paleontologist, and I forget her name, because also is I think a neurobiologist. Again, we'll link this down below. Had done an estimate on the projected average number of neurons in the brain, and one estimate found that they might have had as many neurons as like a baboon or something very intelligent. So that's the highest estimate I've ever heard. That's horrifying. As bombastic as I am, I'm not going to throw my hat into the ring for them being as intelligent as baboons. I don't see any reason why they couldn't, but that's a whole other discussion. I'm going to say these things were probably pretty darn intelligent compared to other dinosaurs of their day. They had large brains compared to everything else around them. How smart or problem-solving intelligent or how social they are, again, that's harder to gauge, except by just reasonable inference. Crocodiles are cold-blooded, much smaller brains. They're smarter. The more we look at them, the smarter they are. The more social structure crocodiles have, the more parental care, et cetera, et cetera. So Tyrannosaurs had a Tyrannosaur had a bigger brain in proportion to body size than is that right? Yeah, large brains in proportion to body size for what they were, for large archosaurs. So they were I'm going to say absolutely they were smarter than crocodiles. They would have had to have been. They were warm-blooded. So even if it was exactly as smart as a crocodile, it was a crocodile in fast forward. It was a crocodile with a much faster metabolism. So the thought processes that a crocodile would have would just have happened much, much faster.
I didn't realize they were warm-blooded. Wow.
So yeah, again, I'm comfortable by asking, throwing my hat into this ring. There were large theropods. They would have been warm-blooded. For various reasons in biology, paleontology, the assumption is always make it less cool, less interesting, less scary, because everyone wants to make something cool, and so be conservative in your estimates of whatever it is. So we tend to say, oh, cold-blooded, that's still, part of that is just waiting for everyone who grew up hearing them as cold-blooded to grow old and retire and give up their tenure, because no one likes to say I've been teaching the wrong thing for my whole life and I'm a failure and all that. Pardon, I was gonna say pardon. I'm not going to apologize for my assault against academia. It's whatever. As far as their metabolism, really cool. Back like 10, 15 years ago, a Tyrannosaur femur was discovered, big one, that was being moved. As it was moved, it wasn't sporite, so it broke. An oily substance leaked out of the inside of the femur. Inside the bone, actual soft tissue had been preserved, almost like the center of a geode. It mineralized around it, and so there was oil, there were lipids, there were fats, and there was actually the remnant structures of veins. So we actually have some leftover evidence of their circulatory system, and the histologist looking at it said, yeah, this is an emu or an ostrich. It's a large bird. So the demands of a structure that are designed for a large bird, if you're cold-blooded, you just couldn't afford that. These things were warm-blooded, again, comparable to birds. They're more closely related to birds. Tyrannosaurs are more closely related to birds than they are to other earlier carnivorous dinosaurs. So like Allosaurus, or the later ones, like I mentioned, the Carcharodontosaurs or the Giganotosaurs. I believe they're more closely related to Allosaurus, if memory serves. The whole question of how closely related ancient lineages are, that's another matter, but they're more closely related to birds. Incidentally, another thing to cover. I don't know how we're doing for time. I lose track of time talking about Tyrannosaurs, but
we're good.
Tyrannosaurids as a group, they had feathers. Two different species have been found with preserved feathers, very thin hair-like feathers. So think sort of like a I almost said moa, like an emu or a kiwi, even a bit more simpler, more fur-like, but they had insulating structures. So there are tiny ones, tiny tyrannosaurs whose name I forget, that had feathers. There were 1-ton predators that had feathers. So again, bombastic. At very least, the babies they were born with downy feathers. They would have been cute little monsters. Whether they lost them as adults or not, it's whether the adult was covered in fur like feathers. That's been a big question. It's hard to say. All of our modern large animals are mostly hairless. So rhinos and tropical elephants, not talking woolly elephants, cold weather elephants, hippos, they're all relatively sparsely furred. So whether they had whether the adults were covered in fur or down or not, that's harder to gauge. I love the internet jumped on the question of their feathers. Tyrannosaur feathers. Oh, it was like a big chicken. Like, if anything, it was like an ostrich-sized crocodile hawk. So yes, oh no, it's fluffy. I'm scared. But grizzly bears are fluffy. Get out of my face with this hole. It's fluffy. It's less scary. Tigers are fluffy. This was oh no, it's fluffy. That means it made less noise when it moved. No, oh, this is such less of a nightmare.
Yeah.
That's a whole other question. My absolutely bombastic. My brother Ian and I both had this suspicion that, like, look, this was a giant predator, the biggest thing ever. It would have had threat postures. We're both like, whatever, flip a coin. Maybe they had manes like lions. Why not? You're a big animal. You have to be scary. I'm just gonna say at least one of the Tyrannosaurids, if not Tyrannosaurus Rex, at least one of them had some kind of a mane frill thing. They had the ability. If you're a big animal, and that's your big threat posture, doesn't hurt to look any bigger. African elephants, they have the huge thing. It's an elephant and it wants to look bigger. No reason at all why Tyrannosaurus wouldn't have been able to puff itself up a little bit. I don't
cool
see
would
any
that be?
reason how. That's a whole other thing. So that covered. So I don't want to. I'll get to the threat postures again. Quick, ask me another question.
Do you want to take one of the questions from your friends? There
Yeah,
was one about arms, right? I'm
yeah,
curious
thank you.
about that too.
I've been trying to sprinkle
Okay.
Salt Bay the answers in amongst here. The question about Tyrannosaur arms. They had tiny arms. Another thing to joke. Tyrannosaurs couldn't give high fives. that whole thing. So again, oh no, they had tiny arms. Again, they're so much less scary. The general reason for the smaller arms is the way the neck musculature for holding up the head, not for holding up the tail, the neck musculature in dinosaurs, in theropod dinosaurs, the meat-eating dinosaurs, it was attached to the shoulder girdle, so it was much more tightly connected to their shoulders. So there's sort of an either or. You can have a really strong, big, potential damage-causing head and a neck that can hold, which means your shoulders are taking that, or you can have strong arms. You don't really see. I can't think of any examples of a large, not large, any theropod dinosaur that has really strong, big head and really big arms. So either or. That dinosaurs with huge arms, big, strong arms, smaller head, smaller, less powerful neck. So much of I'm sort of fudging a lot here, but the smallness of the arms is more that the head was more important to be able to be the big focal point in damage. That was a sacrifice, a reasonable sacrifice for Tyrannosaurs to have a big bite. I think it'd be fair to say, and this is like I love this. It's a good comparison again to humans. Tyrannosaurs gave up their arms the same way humans gave up our bite. To have this massive brain, we had to give up our brow, our heavy, the big, ape, like gorilla, chimp, or even Neanderthal brow, and the heavy jaw, so we could have this huge brain. This is what we kill with. So we gave up all this extra structure for we gave up our ridiculously strong ape bite to have a massive brain. Tyrannosaurs gave up their the hunting claws of their earlier ancestors to have a much stronger bite. The arms themselves, it's funny, they were tiny, but a tyrannosaur arm, they had just the two claws, and they're about the size of an adult human. So if you figure, little claws on this giant body, the arms themselves had a very limited range of motion. So it wasn't just people say, oh, it's an atrophied, not really functional structure. The arms did have specialized structures, had very specialized range of motion, and they basically just for like a hug motion. That's about what it could do, sort of a curling hug. And the arms were very powerful. A Tyrannosaur arm could curl like 500, 600 pounds. So it was think like a bear arm. So very limited range of motion, very strong. A T-Rex could probably, if it wouldn't be a curl, put them on a modified pec deck and they could move a ton. So they were doing something.
Pulling the food to the face, basically.
Not to the face.
Reinforcing?
Pulling something to its chest. So whether that was it's a 1-ton hug. So it runs into something. I'll have to get to that when I cover what a Tyrannosaur attack would look like. So pulling something closer to body, either having some kind of balance if it runs into something and tries to destroy it with its bite. Another question, another theorized use would have been in copulation. So there are modern, so a Tyrannosaur hug during copulation during Tyrannosaurus sex. So that's actually, that one seems a bit more plausible to me because we see equivalents in modern animals. We have constrictor snakes, like pythons. They have the little vestigial claws around there. That's the last remnants of snake feet. Are these claws used in copulation? We see similar structures in sharks and stingrays, although it's actually a modified part of the pelvic fin called a clasper, which is also acts like a penis. So we see similar structures and adaptations in animals for copulation. So whenever you see something that's very limited, in my opinion, whenever you say it's very limited in it's obviously adapted for something, but it's very, very limited, only do one thing. Like something to do with reproduction is often, in my opinion, what you see. So it's a cool idea. It's a cute idea that they use them in Tyrannosaur sexy time hugs, but jury's still out as to what they actually did. We do know that they were involved in something. The Tyrannosaur skeletons, all adult skeletons, the big ones, the mature adults, they had injuries everywhere. And so starting off from the arms, they had tendon avulsions. So whatever an arm has two really blunt claws that can do a curl motion at 500 pounds at least, they were taking so much force that an arm that can curl 500 pounds was getting the tendon ripped clean away from the bone and then healing and reattaching. So they were doing something with these arms. They were exerting the force, and this isn't just, oh, the arm got broken. No, that was from trying to hang on to whatever, and it broke. So I'm just going to say those arms were being used on something that weighed well over a ton, because 1-ton arm each to pull a tendon clean off, gonna be something big. Let's see. That handles the question of arms. Shall
Did
I
they,
go into? Hmm?
can I ask on that? So, did they, is there evidence of them like moving to two legs, or is that just always been their
Hmm?
morphology? They're just like
Oh,
evolving to two legs, or are they just they're just a they started as a two-legged creature? Like, what's their evolutionary morphology? Like, does that make any sense?
how did
'Cause
they?
how did
How
two
did
legs be? How
trans
did two legs become the choice?
the default? The
Yeah.
default for two legs happened in the Triassic period, so over 200 million years ago with predatory dinosaurs. Um, Again, it's uh, if you're on two legs, you're fast, you're mobile. Think like an ostrich or cassowary. And for that large a head, again, they gave up the forelimbs so you could have a better, stronger, more active bite.
And
So
I guess standing on two legs would position the head up. You're not trying to
yeah,
support it forward and
it's I mean,
huh.
I mean, you figure like it's 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 nice having height in a fight where you have where you have some kind of height. That's a big advantage when you're the organs you're using to fight with are just a massive, a massive shredding head. It's nice to be able to bite down. It's nice to be able to get at the back of something's neck. It's nice to be a bit more mobile with your build. So they've been Tyrannosaurs. So their relatives, the earliest meat eating dinosaurs, the theropod dinosaurs, they've been bipedal for 150 million years before Tyrannosaurus, before the end of Cretaceous. So being bipedal was a long established adaptation with them.
Were they fast?
Um, Estimates on Tyrannosaurus speed vary. So what we do know is that they're I won't dive too deep on this. The structure of their foot was designed to conserve energy. Their so their metatarsals, is that right? So this, these guys, instead of being all just uniform in the same length, the two outer ones sandwiched the middle one, and the middle one was sort of squozen in between, and it came to a head at the bottom, but at the end closer to the body, it thinned out almost like the width of my hand, and the whole structure would have been wrapped in tendons and fascia. So the result was that it was a structure that could conserve energy, almost like a human foot. So they were designed to be able to keep on moving for a long time. They were endurance runners. How fast they were running, in endurance, an animal that big, I have this sort of rule of thumb. Everything, it goes, everything runs 20 miles an hour. In nature, elephants can hit 20 miles an hour. Elephants are herbivores that uh, don't have to run something down. They don't have any real predators. So an animal the size of a tyrannosaur that's hunting things mostly smaller than it. It's just based off of where do we see the tyrannosaur bite marks? What do we find in tyrannosaurid, stomach contents? They would mostly go after things smaller than it. It's a big predator. Why go after something bigger than you, especially if falling over can kill you? So I'm just going to say they could run at no less than 20 miles an hour and probably keep that pace up for a good period of time. I've heard estimates, other mechanics saying like, yeah, more than that, 25, maybe 30 at a burst. They their bodies should have been able to handle at least 20, maybe 25 reps because their legs are extremely strongly built. Their feet are absolutely massive, even as a biped. But it means that each foot for each step had to handle the entirety of the animal's weight. Elephants can cheat and fudge a lot because they have four legs. They only need to really lift one foot at a time. They'll lift more than that, but that's so they don't need to bear as much weight. A Tyrannosaur had to be able to handle the entire weight on each foot. That being said, the foot itself was disproportionately large, even for how big it was. So again, think like other massive predators, tigers or bears. It was a huge paw. The foot itself was just absolutely, absolutely massive. So it could take the force of moving pretty quickly.
Stability,
And huh?
stability as well, right? Like
Stability would have been rather stable. Um, the thing about being around really large animals, let's use elephants as the example, they're disconcertingly quiet when they move, and elephants don't have to hide from anything. This animal had to hide from creatures that were worried about Tyrannosaur a lot. So worried they built, they built armor and spears. So um, they would have been able to move pretty damn quickly, disconcertingly fast for how big it is. Like something that big shouldn't move that quick. They absolutely would have been that fast. 20 miles an hour, something probably with good acceleration because it's an ambush predator. Probably really quiet. It was
yeah,
probably so in the movie Jurassic Park, the boom, 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 the loud feet, like no, nothing has ever shook the earth when it walks, so it's a beautiful idea. Um, uh, they would have it would have been quiet. It would have been a few snapping twigs. So, if you were off the saving this for the climax of what would a Tyrannosaur attack would like, it would have moved quietly and in the dark. Add to
I've heard
the feet.
I've heard something about the tails adding to their locomotion, like that wave down the body, down the spine. I remember reading an article about that or something. Yeah,
I hadn't heard that.
added to like their kinetic.
Woo!
Yeah,
That would make sense in just providing the extra stability. So unlike modern birds, just have to balance because they're more upright. And this goes to another question I have. Thank you for raising that one. Uh, if you got a long plank, it will be much easier to balance. Um, uh, Question from Christine in Philly. Hi, Christine. Why did the early museum mounts depict them as being upright, with a long curved tail? I don't know, man. 19th century scientists, they were doing the best they could with what they had at the time, knowledge wise, and thought, oh, it's like a kangaroo. That was the thought. They did that with all dinosaurs. They did that with the first reconstructions of the first big, like really complete bipedal or considered bipedal time dinosaurs, iguanodon. They depicted them walking on their hind legs, upright with the tail curved, dragging on the ground. Again, the tail dragging. It's just naturalists doing the best they can, trying to say these things were old and dumb, and that's why they're extinct. Dot dot dot. Social Darwinism. Don't have to go any further with that. Modern crocodilians and snakes, their tail will drag a bit, but the Tyrannosaurs would have been the upright posture would have been like we see nowadays in the movies. The back relatively horizontal, the head a bit higher, the tail straight behind them, helping balance them out. So as to posture and the structure of the tail, that's really cool. I hadn't heard the idea of it being helping. Like there'd be like a resonance to
yeah,
the
something like
force
that.
off.
I
Um,
I vaguely remember it from our article, but
um, Goodness, they're scary. Uh, Pathology, the fossil evidence of injuries and how the injuries healed in Tyrannosaurus. How are we doing for time?
we are doing good. We getting closer to an hour, I think.
Cool.
Be 50 minutes or so.
Cool. Um, every mature adult Tyrannosaurus specimen that's found had injuries. There were big injuries on these things. So if all the ones we found have some injury or another, it means that injuries were a common part of their life. It'd be reasonable to say that when you saw a Tyrannosaur that died, they didn't die of old age. They died of something burly happening to them. So the favorite the common, so they have all over the body, they'll have tendon avulsions, a big animal exerting so much force that a tendon rips away from the bone, and re-heals and attaches again. Crocodilians and birds, especially ground birds, they're really good at healing. If anyone who's had any veterinary or farm experience with chickens, they'll heal from horrendous injuries. Crocodilians even more so. We see wild crocodiles that survive having a lower jaw ripped off or a leg ripped off, and they just heal and survive. Tyrannosaurs were absolutely no exception to the rule. The specimen Sue, which I was able to see in the back room, I wasn't able to see the jawbone, and she had pitting over her jaw. I'm just going to stick with the assumption of her biological sex. There was evidence of infections, so open ulcers on the jaw from some kind of parasite. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's tricha something or other. She had evidence of gout. There's evidence in joints of the grinding of urea crystals building up between the joints. So for this individual, as a mature older adult, it hurt to walk. There would have been a pain, a discomfort in walking. In I believe pretty much all mature adult tyrannosaurs, and this is older information. I might need to re-up on this, but a large percentage of mature tyrannosaurs on all their lumbar vertebra were in adults were fused together. And this isn't the craziest thing. Some animals, the lumbar vertebra is automatically fused. This wasn't an adaptation. This was a pathology where the lumbar vertebra and the lower spine, where the spine meets the hip, were rubbing together and taking whatever amount of injury. The discs actually, through the animal's life, were worn away, and then the raw bone rubbed in the raw bone, and then it fused. So it was exerting enough force, in humans. We've both seen in humans pathologies that make spines fuse together. And humans are apes. Apes are good at healing. We're talking about a bad day, a fall from a tree, a car crash, lifting way too much weight. That's what a mature tyrannosaur just did in their life, was exerting enough force so that their spines fused together. Wow. An adult tyrannosaur, as triumphant as it was, would have injured. So for all of my peeps out there who have fused spines, you're in good company. This is fused spines. It's the fused spines and gout. The affliction of kings is what this animal had. So if you've got a fused spine out there, if you got gout, you got anything, you're a human T-Rex. So my hat is off to you. The injuries on their heads, they had bite marks. Most of the also have somewhere on the skull, there'll be a tooth mark from another tyrannosaur, or an embedded tooth cast, or in case an embedded tooth grown over from another tyrannosaur.
Wow.
They were biting each other's faces. A particularly large specimen, specimens are given their boring numerical name, where it was found, year it was found, that sort of thing. They're also given nicknames. Sue is called Sue. One of the more famous ones, one of the largest skulls, is nickname is Stan. His top of his head was bitten off. The animal's brain case was exposed. Think like a trephine accident, circular saw accident, and the bony edges around the break had healed. So this animal survived having another tyrannosaur bite off the top of its head, so that its brain would have been exposed to the air, and not the air, at least exposed, and it healed back over again. Which sounds absurd, but again, I've seen all sorts of. My family used to keep pet chickens, and chickens get attacked by stuff. I have the odd experience of taking chickens to the vet, and the amount of injuries that these animals can heal from naturally of birds and is just ridiculous. So yeah, absolutely, they survived and healed from that. An adult tyrannosaur, part of its day-to-day life was the consideration I might have to bite the face of another tyrannosaur. And this, I guess, finally ties into social structure and what a tyrannosaur attack would have looked like.
All right.
I think I think I'll do, because social structure is the most beautiful romantic part of it. I'll say that for the very end. A adult Tyrannosaur attack. And oh, sorry, but almost quick sidebar. Attacks from the smallest Tyrannosaur to larger Tyrannosaur. We'll do it that way. Baby T-Rexes, size of a turkey, small head in proportion to the body, smaller than the adult. So the reverse of most other baby animals. Very long legs. You look at them, it's lanky. It's like this is an ostrichy looking thing. So they were, let's say they were a newborn, 4 feet long, tail tip to snout, and like a foot and a half off the foot in the house. Hold on. It's a foot and a half off the ground. It's a little thing. Long, lanky limbs, maybe 6 feet long. So long, lanky limbs, fast. These were fast little animals. The proportions on their limbs were akin to a fast long distance runner, greyhound like critter, wolf like critter. So they could move pretty damn fast. I would not. I'm going to say I would not be able to catch a month-old Tyrannosaur with my bare hands. It's a fast-running critter. Over the tiny ones are almost certainly faster than the adults. They live in a world with other Tyrannosaurs. They'd have to outrun an adult potentially. They would have eaten whatever. They would have eaten whatever they wanted. Tiny Tyrannosaur, anything they could get their teeth around, they would have eaten. They small mammals, small reptiles, small birds, anything that the adults, spoiler alert, they live in family groups, anything the adults would have wanted them to eat. But they would also have been hunters. I mean, if you've even seen, anyone's seen chickens that are free range from birth, and this is pretty much all birds are predatory, are at least somewhat predatory in nature, with the one exception being the only bird that has claws on its wings, the hoatzin. And for whatever reason, they're the only ones that only eat plants. That's the stupid exception. Every bird will eat meat, and every bird has an immediate, reaction to bite something that's moving. I've seen chickens eat snakes. I've seen chickens eat mice. They're not even adapted as predators. Tiny Tyrannosaurs would have gone after anything that moved. Would have been adorable. Would have been terrifying. As they got larger and larger, they kept that the proportions on the body stayed lanky, stayed long, limber, fast. The proportions on the skull were different when they were younger. They had more teeth and sharper teeth when they were younger. So it would have been a much more like a typical theropod. Run fast, bite, tear, bleeds to death, you eat it. The teeth hadn't become the round, the carrot diameter crushing teeth until they were about the age of 15. So personally, one of the questions you always have to ask about Tyrannosaurs, why did they, the question is like, could I outrun it? Could it kill me? The biggest adult, that's not the thing that worries me. What worries me, Dylan, you're in the end of the Cretaceous period. Oh shit, my time machine broke. What am I worried about? I'm worried about the adolescent age, the 1 ton, the 1.5 ton, monsters also that would have been absolutely faster than I can run. There's no way these things didn't run at least 25, 30 miles an hour, something like that. It was perfectly built to be able to run really fast, had more teeth, sharper teeth. A recent study in how strong their bite force was with a head that's only this big, a head that's only this big, like, oh, yeah, it only had 1,500 pounds per square inch on the teeth. Just to bite, it's only like a tiger. Like, oh, that makes me feel better. That's the thing you can't outrun that also has night vision. So, oh, great. It's a giant eagle hawk crocodile with blade teeth. That size range, again, eating whatever they could run down with no other predatory species. No other predatory species were bothering them, attacking them. That's it was just other T-Rexes. The only other predatory animal that could have threatened them would have been giant pterosaurs. There were giant pterosaurs that had, so I think one of the streaming servers recently released a documentary depicting Tyrannosaurs dealing with Quetzalcoatlus, which was like a giraffe-sized pterosaur with a 6-foot long spearhead. So that's a you can see the clips on YouTube. That's the one thing that land predator reasonably could have threatened a young Tyrannosaurus, a lucky giant Tyrannosaurus. Same way, a giant pterosaur. Same way a heron could be a threat to a young raccoon or something, or a young wolf. That would be a concern. By the time they reach, and I'm going to address the scavenger question when we get the fully mature adults. The young ones absolutely were active predators. Around the age of 15, you're a young Tyrannosaur. Your voice is cracking. You've got your sort of awkward, lanky limbed, but fast, sharp teeth. The age of 15 came around. This has been revealed through so Tyrannosaurs. They have, and like all dinosaurs, like most horned animals, they're sort of annular growth rings. Different times of the year, they grow faster. So you can actually count through a cross section of bone. You can count like growth rings on a tree. When were they going faster? Steady rate of growth until about 15. Between 15 and 16, 17, 19, they had a massive growth spurt. Think like a teenager human growth spurt. And in that period of time, the body morphed. The legs became proportionately shorter, the body much larger. This is just all blamed around the head, ballooning out. The jaw muscles ballooned out. They lost a lot of their teeth when they're younger. Their teeth would grow out, shed, fall out, new tooth grows in, just like crocodiles. The sharp ones stopped growing in. The ones that did grow in were thicker, and there was less of them. So they actually lost the absolute number of their teeth as they got older. In this 3-4 year period, they put on tons of weight. So it went from being this smaller, more nimble critter, in fact, a lot like many of the other earlier Tyrannosaur species, and just got absolutely yoked. To put it into comparison, it'll be like, for how much bigger and more powerful, think of a lanky, 14-year-old human, puppy human, right? Or 13, 14-year-old. If that human in the next 4 years, 5 years, became a silverback gorilla, that's how much bigger, stronger, greater bite strength, sheer capacity to end things. That, I think, is a fair comparison for just how much faster. And they were eating enough. That's probably why we know they were warm-blooded. To grow that fast, their caloric load would have been ridiculous. Just, I'm not going to throw the numbers out there. Maybe we can, again, maybe in the many links we're going to have to include this video. They were just consuming large amounts of calories, millions of calories, for a warm-blooded apex predator. By the time they were a mature adult, the only thing that was a meaningful threat to them was the largest of herbivores, which they could avoid, and other tyrannosaurs. The question about scavenging, I'm going to be both bombastic and throw a little shade. There's one or two folks in the paleontology community who are really strong about the whole T-Rex as scavengers thing. Should I name names? I don't have to name names. You can find this guy's name on the internet. My personal opinion as to why people still hang on to the Tyrannosaurus scavengers thing is because they're afraid of Tyrannosaurs hiding in their closets at night, and they want to imagine they could outrun Tyrannosaurs and Tyrannosaurs wouldn't eat them. A rule of thumb I've found throughout naturalist studies: everything, with a few exceptions, that is described as primarily a scavenger, it eats meat. I don't know where this comes from. Greenland sharks are primarily scavengers. Turns out Greenland sharks eat seals and hunt them at night, which is just absolutely awful. Hyenas, primarily scavengers. They, just because they can scavenge doesn't mean that it's only a scavenger. The only examples of animals that are primarily scavengers are modern day vultures. They are, and maybe a few insects, right? Animals that can fly. That's what a predominant scavenger is. Animals that burn very few calories and can go a long time without eating. There's no way you can go from corpse to corpse to corpse and not and get enough calories to put on that kind of growth. There's no land-based bone crusher that's purely a scavenger. You can scavenge. So grizzly bears can scavenge. They can scare wolves off hills. Wolverines can scavenge and they can scare grizzly bears off hills. Hyenas can scavenge, but these are predatory adaptations. You don't get to bone crusher. If you don't eat your meat, you can't have any pudding. If you can't crush, you don't start as a predator crushing bones. You don't end up as a scavenger. Tyrannosaurs scavenged whatever they could, whatever they want to, or could scare off or find. That would have been certainly a big advantage for them, that they're a predator that could find large bones that have been picked clean, just like humans. Oh no, there's just femurs. What am I going to do? You're going to eat the femur and get all the marrow in it. The adults were also active predators. There are fossilized Triceratops adult skulls where the horn itself had been bitten off with impressions shaped like Tyrannosaur, again, because it stamps. It'll stamp the shape of its tooth in the bone, and the horn healed over. There was a full-grown Edmontosaurus, so a massive, like a 20-ton herbivorous dinosaur with a section of tail that had been bitten. A Tyrannosaur tooth was lodged in there, and the bone had grown over it. It wasn't biting a body; it was biting a live animal. The live animal got away. They were going for it. So scavenging, absolutely, whenever they wanted to. A larger percentage of it was from things they killed, and also the argument of they scared off other predators from their kills. The only other predators were other tyrannosaurs. So how did the other tyrannosaurs kill an Edmontosaurus, a Triceratops, what have you? So that's circular reasoning. They scavenged. They were absolutely active predators. An adult, back to the bite strength. An adult Tyrannosaurus bite. Let's paint the picture. It's evening in the late Cretaceous, Hell Creek Formation. We're sitting on a hilltop. The wind rustles by as a summer, lightning struck, brush fire wafts a little smoke towards us. We look to our left and right. We see pine trees. We see coffee bushes, tea bushes. Again, bombastic. We see sweet fern plants, growing on the sparse, well-drained hillside. And as the sun is setting, we see tyrannosaurs rising up from their daytime siesta. Like any apex predator, they would have spent most of their time sleeping, resting, just like lions. That's what they would have done. Other dinosaurs, smaller eyes, not as well adapted to see at night, would have been bedding down, probably in some kind of defensive position, because you live in a world of tyrannosaurs. A family of tyrannosaurs wakes up to start hunting. And so I guess I'm going to have to include the social structure in the hunt, and then I'll explain what we know about the social structure. The mature adult or adults, tolerating the whining cheeps from the playful young, just like lions would tolerate lion cubs playing around. They rise up, disconcertingly quiet. There wouldn't have been a loud roar or bellow. That's the final thing I need to make sure I cover is vocalizations. There wouldn't have been a loud roar, loud noise. They would have been relatively quiet. Maybe if there was any loud noise, like that would have actually been the time when they would have made a sound. So lions, right? They're territorial. They're the apex predators of their environment. They will, roar, announce their presence, everything else around them, saying, "This is my territory. This is where I am. Don't mess with me." They actually roar in the evening because just where the differential in temperature, the cool air descending, the last warm air rising, there's a time of day where there's this pocket of air that sound travels through better. So if tyrannosaurs were giving off a territorial sound, it would have most likely been at that time of day if it was any other time of day. Loud roar, whatever it would have been, it probably would have been very deep. We see in the movies like Jurassic Park, that's a combination of like lion roar and an elephant cry. Whatever sound this large animal would have made would have been deep. It would have been very deep. So think like people say, "Oh, it squawked like a goose." Sure, fine. Say it squawked like a goose if that makes you feel less scared of the Tyrannosaurus in your closet. Um, think more like an owl. You know, owls, they're territorial, they're night hunters, they live in family groups, so Tyrannosaurus wake up. Yeah, just imagine that. Just say Tyrannosaurus made a sound like a barred owl pair, but as deep as an alligator. Deeper. Really deep. So just pick, so deep you can feel it in your bones. That sound, only as deep as an oboe, bass trombone, whatever you want to call it. They, that would have been when they would have vocalized. Like any big animals, the question, this question actually came from Charlie Blackwell. Did they make infrasound, really really deep sounds? Why not? I'm just gonna say they did. Alligators do it. Um, every really big animal is going to tend to make as deep a sound as it can because it tells everything else around you your absolute size. So to be able to make a deep note, that's why humans pay attention to other humans with deep voices. Oh, it's got to be bigger, right? So, perfectly decent chance it communicated with infrasound. Uh, Perfectly impossible. He's like, no evidence for this, just romantic. Totally possible. Like elephants, they could communicate with infrasound through their feet. Elephants, their deepest vocalizations aren't even carried by the air. They will lock their legs out. I believe some of their ligaments are designed to be sound conducting. Like no, they are. They had to because they produce noises really deep that echo through the ground to other elephants. The other elephants hear them through their feet. So just saying, elephants can hear through the sound of their feet. Perfectly possible. Again, here, that's what I love about the conversation. When we start talking about it, I start thinking, perfectly possible. I don't know. Here, someone who actually has a degree, look and see if how well a tyrannosaur foot would function as acoustic as a receiver, as a microphone. I'd be willing to bet it does. The foot's really large, has massive surface area, really shock absorbing. It could absorb sound. So I'm just going to say, with no evidence at all, in the next 5 years, someone will do a study on this. And it'll turn out that yes, they could hear their feet, whether it was, and if they could hear their feet, which why not? There's other big animals around there that probably made big noises. They probably could hear with their feet, where the nearest whatever Edmontosaur herd or Alamosaurus herd was at the time. So there, Dylan
That's
mapped
awesome.
it.
Yay.
They they
We got our hypothesis in too. Good job.
Yeah, hypothesis. Somebody, who will rid me of this Dane? Who will do the research for me? And like, come on, there's an acoustic engineer out there who's got some spare time. Just look at the foot. Does that weird metatarsal structure actually function as like a tuning fork or something? So certainly they would have made noise. People say, "Oh, it's just a weird honking sound." Yeah, I'm so not scared of a Canadian goose. This is a 5-ton goose that lives off of crunching bones. I'm so not scared of that. Again, owls. Oh no, it's a 7-ton, death owl. That's, if it whatever noise it made, and they would have had to have been able to make a noise that covers a crazy distance because why not? Alligators make noises that let everything know where it is. Modern predatory birds, they make really loud noises, especially the bisides. Like I said, the night hunters, owls, they want every other owl to know this is my territory. Don't don't come here. A tyrannosaur with all these injuries, you know, uh, you know, a little hint for the end, that would often have fights with other tyrannosaurs. They would have made some kind of noise that could have been heard miles away. Because why not? You're that big. Your territory is miles. If you're that big, you can hear probably close to the edge of your range. You could probably shout even louder than you can hear. I do believe a study was done on their inner ear bones, and did have particularly acute hearing for infrasound. So At very least, they could hear other animals infrasound. Probably could hear each other. So there's tyrannosaur vocalizations. Every depiction of a tyrannosaur roaring in an attack, that's Hollywood. That's people who've never actually dealt with predators or have even watched nature documentaries. You want the public to say, "Oh, that's scary," any kind of monster movie where there's any scary animal that attacks. The movie Ghost in the Darkness, where there's the killer lions of Savo attacking people. They roar when they attack. No, no, the attack would have been nearly silent. So Tyrannosaur, they wake up, they hoot like owls, only so deep it makes the windows of your car rattle like a car driving by with bass. Whatever noise, womp womp womp, and then they're quiet. They get up, they start walking. They're lucky enough that there's a herd nearby of I'll pick Edmontosaurus, medium-sized herbivore, and they smell. There's one that's sick. I say smell. The largest part of their brain, I believe, absolutely was the olfactory lobe. Ridiculously large olfactory lobe in their brain. Their sense of smell was probably one of the best this planet has ever seen. Dylan, why didn't you, the smell master, why didn't you say about their sense of smell? They would have had a ridiculously good sense of smell. So not only could they see ridiculously far away with ridiculous detail in low light, they would have a very clear understanding of their prey items, even if they didn't see them. So you might be able to tell looking, oh, this herd looks a little weaker, a little stronger. You say, oh no, this herd has young that are being sheltered by the adults. Young I can't see because they're hiding behind the adults. This herd has an old individual that through smell alone, they say, hey, this individual has a lung infection and it's going to be easier to kill. Or this herd has, whatever particular issue. Here's an individual, here's an old bull triceratops that's injured. There was a dispute between triceratopses. It got gored and it's injured, it's weak, it's got an infection. That's a thing they would know. Let's say this family of tyrannosaurs, let's give a number. There's, mom and dad, assuming the same size, the male and female, they're a breeding pair. Why the hell wouldn't they have been in breeding pairs? That's what birds do. That's what all predatory birds I can think of do. So there's no reason why they wouldn't. Dylan, being bombastic, they lived in mated pairs. If they live in family groups, then they lived in mated pairs. And I'll get to the family groups in the end. Two big adults. The pair. I've just decided that the gender pronouns, sex pronouns, like cattle are bull and cow. Chickens, hen, rooster. I'm just gonna say it because no one else has said it, or I haven't found it in it. The males were called kings, the females were called queens. If you disagree with me, it's because you're wrong. That's the like what are the young called? Like what did you say? Like princess? Do we have to what is this question? So we have our king and queen. We'll just call them king and queen. And we have our our little princelings and princesslings. There's 2 or 3 medium-sized ones. So like in Ravens, where the young from last year hangs out with the parents. And there's a whole litter of teeny tiny little ones that are just following around. These are, let's call them birds. They're ground birds. They would have had a lot of young. Ground birds, there's a high attrition rate, so they would have had a good number of young. Decent chance the medium-sized ones, they were predators. They would have been slept near their parents to protect them from other tyrannosaurs. They would have either gone on the hunt with their parents and maybe scouted out ahead and around, or driving other animals ahead of it. Maybe went off and hunted on their own. Who knows? The little ones certainly would have hung closer to the largest adults simply because that's how you stay safe. maybe one adult hung behind while the other one went up, uh, that are a mile away from a bull triceratops that is old, has an injury. At least one of the adults walks up from downwind. You can smell the adult. It's a moonless night. There's no light but the stars, and everything else out there doesn't have as good vision as a tyrannosaur. There wouldn't have been this, like in the documentary, the roaring tongues of rah rah rah. It would have been alert, calm, walking, stalking when it got close enough at an even pace. To see a tyrannosaur walk by at night, it would have been you're on a trail. It's like elephant trails. It would have walked on the trail, approaching the site almost silently. Maybe the rustle of the the ferns as it walked past. Massive feet. It would just been like a black cloud that blotted out the stars or the moon on the night, and then gone. If you were there 65, let's say 67 million years ago, sitting in your game blind as it walked by, you would have seen this critter. It might have glanced at you. It ignored you because it's after a bull triceratops and it needs a lot more food than a human. If it went after you, went after anything else smaller, you would have made noise. Everything in the Cretaceous period around them would have understood it's a tyrannosaur. I'm gonna try not to make noise and pretend it doesn't want to kill me and eat me. The younger, smaller ones, if it was hunting a large herbivore, it probably would have been just the adults. It wouldn't have brought the little teeny ones around because not only is there risk, but also there's too noisy. You're not going to stop a baby predator from playing. So again, lions will bring baby lions along. Once they got close enough, the youngest would have stayed with one of the adults. The mature adult would have just walked up as quietly and calmly as it could, found the adult or whichever animal that's threatened at the edge, walked up, held really still, maybe for a long time. It's a stalking predator. The whole rush in and attack would have been the last few seconds, and it would have been the whole like Jurassic Park movies, rush in, roar, bite. It would have been what it would have sounded like would have been at most a few short steps. So, and then the sound of bones crushing. Thing went up, put its mouth on whatever it wanted to eat, and then something ended. The amount of force, even if it didn't outright kill the animal, if it didn't get it around, if it didn't break through its brain case or break its neck, whatever amount of damage it could do, let's say it just bit an animal's tail or just bit a limb, this animal is crippled. If it doesn't bleed to death, if it doesn't die of internal injuries from the sheer force, if it gets a limb, this animal is not walking anymore. This is being struck by the human equivalent. Like this is being struck by a car. This is a life-ending injury. And then it would back away. It would bite, whatever damage it did, it would bite, and then as quickly and quietly as it attacked, it would back away. Tyrannosaur attack. Let's say you were in the middle of the herd of Triceratops. There would have been whatever slight rustle, no thumping, just a rustle of plants, and then a sudden, very loud sound of bones breaking. And then this big shadow thing turns and walks away and waits patiently, like any other big predator. It's like a white shark, that's close to the window. Goes in, bite, does world-ending damage, and waits to make sure it's dead. The animal twitches, just a twitching Triceratops. A Triceratops in its death throes swings a half-ton head or whatever. You're going to get injured. So it would almost seem tentative. It would come in, quick, destroy, and then back off. There's no reason for a predator like that. It has all night long that it can wait, circle around the group. These are animals that were the prey species were ready to handle a threat like this. Triceratops probably had some kind of defensive posture where they sat in circles like musk oxen or bison, whether they did that or just back themselves into thick brush or something. They would it would have been a long night for these living tanks. Like, oh shit, there's tyrannosaurs out there. The question of whether the prey species were nocturnal, diurnal, that's one That's when I haven't studied them enough because I'm too busy studying Tyrannosaurs. And that's what it would have looked like, the attack from a Tyrannosaur. If it was hungry or was going after something larger during the daytime, the question about the fused vertebra. So I'm describing an idealized hunt. Tyrannosaur goes after something big that's dying, kills it, backs away. When they had to hunt, decent chance the attack might have involved actually pushing something over. The head was designed to take, not just take bite strength, but to take force. Any animal that has a really strong head for biting, if it can handle the force of a head-on collision between two large trucks, then it can handle a headbutt or some kind of thing. So could have been step, knock the animal over. This again, there's the continuous force on the lower spine. So whatever's happening to the lower, the lumbar spine, that's the force the whole body's taking. So pushing something over or running up with the mouth open and biting, knocking it over, whatever, however they did it. If they had to, they would have been capable of producing more injury. There's even some question about the arms with the tendon avulsions from if they were sort of chest bumping, running up and pushing something over. There's often a reason for having the large feet is for balance. So if you're instead of trying to just knock something over, if you push something the size of an elephant or a rhino over, it's prone. There's not as much you can do. It's harder for an elephant that's knocked over to stand back up again. An elephant that's just been pushed over might break ribs, might be dead anyways. So these are the things, that's the amount of force they would have been capable of in attacking an herbivore. They probably would have preferred an actual, a safer walk up like a white shark, bite the animal, step back instead, and then start eating it. At that point, the younger ones, hungry little ones would have come up. And a cool thing about that, I haven't heard this about as much about Tyrannosaurs, is that because of their different dentition, they would have been able to eat different parts of the carcass. That specialization, the adults would have been able to eat things that would have been impossible for the young ones to eat. So they open up this Triceratops. The youngest ones can just go at the organs, can fill up a nice soft meat, getting into a carcass. So a Triceratops, they had thick hides, think like elephants, but with bony scoots on the outside. So an armadillo elephant, all these big dinosaurs had some level of armor, at least like a crocodile or something. So this big predator was able to open up a massive carcass, and the young ones could start eating everything softer. The young ones weren't limited by how thick the armor was in the adult Triceratops. The mature adult, the king or queen, they could literally focus on the limbs. They could focus on the parts of the body that would have been full of marrow in life. And that would have been very nutrient dense, but they would have been able to have that, no part of the carcass would have been wasted from a large animal. So if you're like an elephant dies in the Serengeti, 3 days later, it's complete, there's no flesh on it. 3 days later, Tarantula, there have been no bones on it. The bones would have been gone, all of that. So every age of the Tyrannosaur, from the tiniest hatchling, Turkish hatchling, to the biggest multi-ton adult, would have had something to eat on the carcass. And I would even say the adults might have even probably preferentially went for the bones because of the marrow, because that's where the most calories are. It's straight up fat. It's bones and brains. They're the nature's ice cream cone. That's what they would have gone for. That is my rough story of how a Tyrannosaur attack would have looked like.
That was excellent. Yeah, that was. I was there. It was amazing.
Yeah, their social structure. So this is the crowning piece of coolness and beauty. And I've been telling this enough. I think I can say it without crying, but if I do cry, I'm not going to hold back, because this is how we teach. Baby Tyrannosaurus Rexes have only been found, might be accepted. The different Tyrannosaurids throughout history, but whatever. That's like comparing, the other Tyrannosaur species. It'd be like comparing a fox to a timber wolf or an Arctic wolf. They're not the same. The tiniest Tyrannosaurus Rexes have been found in the presence of adults. A few years, I think it was earlier this year, it was finally confirmed. There have been 3 separate Tyrannosaur fossil sites where individuals of multiple age groups are found in close proximity to each other. Fossils are rare. Most animals, one in many hundred thousands, millions of animals actually get fossilized, and of those fossils, most are destroyed by weathering. So most of us don't end up as fossils. Humans are accepting because we bury our dead. That'll be fun for future paleontologist species. Apex predators are never the most common animals in their environment. By definition, it's going to be 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 animals. When you're finding, I think it was 3. There have been 3 separate sites where there's a big adult, full-grown king or queen, emperor, and different sized ones. They were living in groups. The only reason a predator would live in groups is because it's family. They were looking after their young. And it makes sense because the only other animals out there were other predators. With most apex predators, the animals that are most likely to kill you are members of your own species. What's most likely to kill a baby polar bear? Another polar bear. What's most likely to kill a lion cub? Another lion. What's most likely to kill a young human? Another human. This is, again and again, a pattern we see through apex predators. And interestingly, it's one of the things you can afford to do when you're an apex predator is both you can afford to look after your young because they're not a problem. Like, I'm looking after my kids. Who's gonna stop me? And since other apex predators, like, oh no, I don't want another polar bear that's not mine reaching full growth. They you look after your young. Crocodilians look after their young, not to the same extent as mammals or birds, but they certainly do have more care for their young out of any other reptilians. Snakes, the largest, pythons, they look after, they wrap around, and you'll actually incubate their eggs. Because why not? I'm a giant python. I don't have to worry. Nothing's gonna mess with me. I'm a Burmese python. So if you can defend your young, you will. Because why not? Rattlesnakes, another reptile that looks after their young, has some kin selection. Again, for whatever reason, because researchers don't want to anthropomorphize, they tend to ignore the possibility of familial behavior because the romantics in us want to say, oh, it's a family, but whatever. Tyrannosaurs lived in families. They looked after their young. And for me, the final evidence for this, the biggest one, is not just that they have, they're all found in the same space, including Sue. So this critter, which is not Sue bones, it's not Tyrannosaur bones, was found with smaller individuals around it, and it would have been an animal that protected its family from other tyrannosaurs. The injuries that you see in an adult tyrannosaur, multiple bite marks on the head, teeth lodged, other tyrannosaurs lodged in the skull, the sheer amount of injury and impact this animal went through, you can't survive hunting prey that does that. So those injuries weren't coming from you, and no species, no predator is going to habitually get into fights with other predators that you're always roughed up as an adult. The exception to this is when you're defending your family. The only other animal that I know of that literally has that same pattern, has ridiculously overbuilt, world-ending, strength, and has the pattern of losing teeth in somebody else's skull, is silverback gorillas. That's the other exception, an animal that's incredibly powerful, that lives in family groups. These injuries between tyrannosaurs, they probably weren't fighting over, oh, this is my dead Edmontosaur. Like these are the options. Either you kill another dinosaur that's not a tyrannosaur, or you fight another tyrannosaur. It's a pretty easy choice. It's a pretty simple decision process to make there. Being bitten by a tyrannosaur is not high on the list of any animal's to-do list, including tyrannosaurs. Although that's part of the level of overbuiltedness. Why the hell were they so ridiculously overbuilt? I'm just going to say it's protecting their young. And because they protected their young, that is why they were able to completely and utterly dominate this ecosystem to the extent that there were no other predators out there. There were so many young tyrannosaurs out there, presumably because they're young, that those young tyrannosaurs were able to outcompete the other equivalent sized predators that would have been in that ecosystem because, hey, I'm a young tyrannosaur. Nothing else bigger than me is going to attack me because there's a big tyrannosaur nearby. I can always run back to mom or dad. So every other predator that's the size, every predator that's just 1 ton, you're competing with other 1 ton predators, young tyrannosaurs, that are protected by a tyrannosaur. So there's nothing you can do to meaningfully outcompete this critter. And all these young tyrannosaurs would have been able to be benefiting from a kill of a mature tyrannosaur. So I'm a young T-Rex. I'm just 13, 14. I'm able to eat maybe not all my meals, but at least a good percentage of my meals is from mom or dad killing something bigger than me. So and again, the fact that they're the only, I can't think of any other species that so completely dominated the land-based ecosystem, the only other apex predator. So that simple thing, they were in conclusion, they were silent, night hunting, family group living terror monsters that the biggest threat they had was other tyrannosaurs. And if there would have been a fight between tyrannosaurs, it would have been a fight between one mature adult defending its young. That's the only reason you would be willing to take that kind of risk. Evolutionarily, is not because, oh, my tummy's a little rumbly, like eat something else. There's stuff to eat. It's, these are my children. This is my mate. And I am literally adapted to fight another tyrannosaur to defend them. That's why silverback gorillas are so overbuilt. They don't need to be that big to eat, wild celery. They don't need to be that big to climb or anything else. They need to be that ridiculously overbuilt to protect their families. So to summarize, they were yeah, that's it. That's the single most beautiful fact about T-Rexes. They were dragons who loved their babies and who would have died to protect them. They're the tears.
That's beautiful. Wow, man.
Ta-da!
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to stop. But what a cool tour through something you're so passionate about. Thank you for sharing that with all of us.
I like to give a quick shout out, Ben. Thank you so much for fostering these conversations and being able to hold space for me to just ADD explode all over the internet. Everyone out there, Ben also has amazing content. Check it out in the various links. Where Ben has a lot more to say as opposed to just trying to wrangle Dylan's mind and Dylan's knowledge. So please do check out all the amazing content that Ben has produced and is a part of. So,
well, thank you for that, and it's a pleasure to wrangle. I mean, the world needs it. So anyway, yeah. Well, thank you, and thank you everyone out there watching, and we appreciate. I'm going to see if I can change the view here again. Yeah, that work? Yeah, thank you guys for watching, and send us questions. You can see how that really fueled Dylan's approach this time. So I guess that's it for Two Great Apes. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much, man.
Talk to you next time.
See you next time.
And